Hello, everyone. I'm Cynthia Myers-Morrison. I'm a board member of Food Addiction Institute and a webinar chair for the organization. And it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Annica Strandberg-Schmidt, who is going to speak to us about how to make healthy food changes with your children. Annica is a sugar addiction therapist. She is certified by Bitten Johnson for sugar, licensed and certified, and also for the Holistic Addiction Medicine Program by Bitten Johnson. She is the author of a book that is translated to Small Sockerbomber and Adult Children. And she is a YouTuber on Annica Strandberg-Schmidt. So you can find her in all sorts of places. She gives knowledge in her book that was recently released about sugar addiction and hands-on advice on how to make changes related to food together with your children, and also about parenting and being a parent and recovering sugar addict. Her hope is to provide support for parents so they can make the changes they themselves are ready to do and find ways to support young people that want to make changes and live a healthy life. So Annica lives on a dairy farm in the western part of Sweden together with her husband and children. She has a lot of experience working with children and parents related to sugar addiction and has been working in the field for 11 years. She has a recovery journey of her own, which I'll ask her to share. And she entered recovery when her children were small, which made her do a lot of research on children and food, parenting, and recovery. And this ended up in her writing the book. Today, her 3 children are aged 19, 17, and 12, and we'll invite her to share about her recovery as a sugar addict and this progression of a disease that she's willing to share her personal story and the things that have worked with her and her children. Thank you. Thanks so much for being with us today, Annica.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'll certainly share some of my story. I know that I'm a sugar addict from being a child myself. I remember from very early age that I was sneaking and stealing and hiding food and so on. And I really started that early on, about 3-4 years or something like that. And when I became a teenager, I always had the feeling that I was kind of not comfortable in my own body, feeling too heavy or swollen or not fitting into my body, kind of. And as I became a teenager, I got help to start losing weight, because I thought that was kind of the solution on my problem. And I was a little bit overweight, but when I'm looking at pictures at me in that age, that wasn't necessary, really. I would have, changed as I grow. But anyway, that's kind of where the wheels started rolling a bit faster. I was losing weight, and I lost too much weight and become unhealthy thin. And I couldn't keep it up because, when I couldn't resist not eating I did it for a long time, but then my disease kind of entered went the other way. So I started overeating instead. And that was where my yo-yo dieting started, up and losing weight and up and gaining weight and so on, for a long time, for many years in my life. And what was really the main issue for me was the mental health. I was depressed, and I was unhealthy, mentally unhealthy, not feeling good about myself in any way. And I thought that everything was related to my weight and my body. When I was in a high weight, I was sure that when I lose weight and get to this special number, of kilograms or whatever, that's when I'll be happy ever after. But it never happens, strangely enough. Anyway, I went on a lot of diets, and I was exercising, and I was gaining and losing and everything. And I met my husband when I was 23. And short after that, we discovered that we were having our first child. And I was then still very, very unhealthy, also mentally unhealthy. And in a short time, we had 2 children. We moved into a small house, which we started to, what's the word in English, renovate or
Renovate.
renovate, yeah. And we had some 2 cows or something. And, you know, from the outside, it looked like a small happy family, you know, really the happy ever after kind of. But I wasn't happy no matter what. I was feeling depressed, and I wasn't healthy. I couldn't care for my children properly. I was always tired, and I wasn't you know, mentally there. I could, you know, sit at a kitchen table and thinking, well, I'm here with my children, you know, but I wasn't really there. I wasn't focusing on them because my thoughts were somewhere else, you know, thinking how to eat or what to eat or not to eat or whatever, you know. But it really ended with me being suicidal at that point. But then I remembered that I read a book about eating healthier to get better mental health, and I'd bought that book many years before, but I kind of, you know, just skid through it, and that was a good book, you know, just putting it away. But then when I was really, you know, really deep into my depression and feeling this, I kind of, well, maybe I should read this book again and see if this might help me, you know, because my life was a chaos, even though it looked very good from outside. And I realized that I really, if I wanted to try this, I really had to do some really scary things, you know, which was putting my favorite food away. And well, anyway, I read some more books, and I heard about a woman called Bitten Johnson, and I contacted her and asked her if she could help me. And so I went to her, and from here to her place where she lives today, and where she had her treatment center then. It's a kind of long way, but I went there just to find out if I had an addiction, because I was afraid that was the case. And she told me, after doing an assessment, that this is what it is. It's an addiction, and you need help. So after that, it took me approximately 1 more year from dieting and trying to. I was putting the food away that I realized I couldn't eat, but after a year or so, I fell back into full. I don't know if I could call it relapse, because I wasn't recovering. I was only abstaining from certain food, you know. But really, that's when my life got really, really messy. And for making a very long story short, I got help from the community here in my part of Sweden where I live. So I got treatment first together with Bitten Johnson, and I had an intensive 4-day intensive. And then I had 10 weeks of primary treatment here in my area in Sweden. And then another week together to deepen my knowledge about food addiction and sugar addiction, and how to recover from that, to get really hands-on tools. And then I went for another year together with other addicts here in my area in Sweden, and that really, really saved my life. So yeah, that's my story, my addiction recovery story.
Wonderful. And I so appreciate your sharing it. I really, truly do. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, how you had these children, and when you started all of this, how old were they?
They were, my boy then, he turned 2, and my girl, she turned 5, 2 and 5, yeah.
And then subsequently you had another child.
in recovery.
In recovery.
Yeah. And that was a big thing for me, because we had a girl and we had a boy, and I was like, well, we really have, the family, but I was longing for another child. And also that was kind of, I don't know, I just so wanted to know what it was like to being pregnant and going through the early stage together with the baby and so on, and being in recovery, being clearly in my mind and being able to fully be there, and I can tell you it's such a different, and I sometimes it hurts knowing that I couldn't give this to my two oldest children, but I'm really grateful and happy that I could give this to my third. So yeah, that's really that's amazing to be able to live through that with them. Yeah.
And you mentioned that with your youngest, that child had not had any sugar or flour for several years.
No, her first 4 years they were without sugar and flour, and I was also very even with fruit. She had that sometimes almost like candy or a treat, something like that. But she was very, and it was when she entered kindergarten. That's when I couldn't, stop it anymore. So. Yeah, but for the four first year, she was off sugar, no flour.
Well, and so now 19, 17, and 12. So you have had some experience with these young people. How can you share about if your child is sensitive to food or potentially a sugar addict? How do you know as a parent?
Well, unfortunately, there aren't any. I mean, like for if you're a sugar addict, you could do the sugar assessment, and I wish we could develop it for younger people. But I mean, for small children, we can't say or give them a diagnose, but we can teach them to be careful with what they eat and how the food affects them. But usually, I kind of say that if you are a sugar addict yourself and you know your children, I mean, as a mother, I knew kind of, and I didn't have to ask anyone. I got the when I went in recovery and I was kind of mentioning that I think that my child may also have this, I got very people around me got very upset, telling me that you don't know that, and just because you are a sugar addict, you can't say that your child is. But I knew in my heart, that's something I could see patterns, I could recognize myself, I know the way with food, everything like that. So I think that if you are a sugar addict, kind of, I know that's not a good way to put it, but I think that's the only way I can put it with young children. Yeah.
Well, Nicola Vina's books now are out with one of her books for pregnancy and another with toddlers. So that information is out into the world, and the Yale food addiction survey material for children is out also. So that it's starting to open up, that there are opportunities for people to learn, and your book is an addition to that. So and I understand that you're beginning to translate it into English also. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to read. So when you diagnose children as a sugar addict or a food addict, diagnose quote in quotes, what are the behaviors that you've noticed, that you've seen with your children and others with whom you've worked, and other families with whom you've worked?
Well, usually they come to me and their children are having tantrums, they can control, and they are being like ADHD. They have problems focusing, they have problems controlling their emotions, being hyperactive, and they can also have physical symptoms like eczema.
Eczema.
Yeah, and problems with their stomachs and so on. but the most common really is that they are obsessed about sweets in some way, and they can't kind of control it. And the older they get, the worse it gets. The parents, they tell me that they find like stacks with sweets or foods that the young people wants to have on their own. But when they are young, usually they can choose playmates depending on what they get to eat there, and being very sneaky around food, and also hiding food or starting on Monday to us, because here, I don't know if it's the same with you, but here in Sweden we have like Saturday, that's the day when we eat sweets. It comes from when the dentists wanted us to eat less sugar. So they said, okay, eat sugar one day a week, and that's the Saturday. And when the children starts to ask on Monday, what day is it? When is it Saturday? Is it Saturday tomorrow? Oh, it's Tuesday. Oh, how many days is it left to Saturday? That's also, the obsession about what to eat and when to eat it and so on. So very, very early, you can see the obsession about eating. And also, if they're going to the grandparents, or what are we going to eat, or do we have some sweets, or so the obsession. And then it's a lot of things we can look for, really.
Mm-hmm.
I have a list in my book, but it's in Swedish.
Well, you've given a good list. I had the experience of having a grandmother that had German and Welsh heritage, and she made donuts that were like Krispy Kreme donuts, the glazed, beautiful, beautiful donuts. And she would cover all the flat surfaces in the kitchen when we grandchildren were coming. And we would eat our way through the kitchen, around the whole kitchen. All of those donuts went into our little tummies. They got bigger tummies, but it was a sign of love. It was, this was a gift she was giving to us. And that's, my father felt, did the same thing with popped corn. And, those two substances are hooked in my mind to love. That's what that means, love. So I go to the movie theater and I smell the smell of the popcorn, and I think, that's love, right? Isn't that love? No, that is not love.
No. And you really have to make the reconnection in the brain that this is not love. But I have almost the same experience. My grandfather was from Germany. Mm-hmm. And when he went there, he bought a special kind of chocolate spread. And now it's all over in the world. You can buy it anywhere now. But then it was a jar like this in size, and it was this special chocolate spread from Germany. And he would buy one jar each for every grandchild. So we had our names on it, or a letter that this is mine, like this. And to me, it's like you say, still when I see this jar, it's like, oh, that's my grandfather, and that's love, really. And for them, it was love. It was love. That's the way they expressed it. But I really had to, make a rearrangement in my brain to understand that, to me, this is not love. I have to find another way to give love and to receive love, not through food or sugar. Yeah.
And those are challenges for us to make that shift from, even other tangible possessions, to change from acquisition of food and acquisition of things to experiential, that we're sharing experiences, we're delighting in learning new skills, we're doing these things that are delights for our spirits. That's a very big change in a family. Very big change. So
it is. But I think that this is also what we just shared about. I think this thing that we so strongly connect the food and the sugar with love is what makes it so difficult for a recovering sugar addict not to give their children sweets or anything because they think they're depriving them. I mean,
Yes.
it's like, oh my God, I don't love her or him enough. And they feel sorry for the children.
Mhm.
And I think this is so difficult because sometimes when I meet parents or families, I'm like it's like you said when in the introduction, you really have to find out how far am I willing to go? Because there are communities on Facebook or groups or so on where you can go and have your kids totally of sugar. I mean, there are support and you can have it, but sometimes I think it's difficult to really be there to be able to do it, because I know that I shouldn't have been able to do it because I would have fought a fight all the time, and I wasn't able to do that. So what I also want to do is to help parents be okay with if they can't go all the way and make their kids totally sugar free, because that's not the only thing recovery is about. For me, I have to abstain, of course. I have to be abstinent from the food that drives my addiction, but
Mhm.
there are so many other areas where I have to grow and develop and learn things, which I didn't have as a child, which I also want to give to my children, and what I need to be able to recover, really.
So
I don't
it's,
know. Sounds messy. I'm thinking a lot and speaking a lot, but I hope
yeah.
I get the message out.
Oh, yes, definitely. That there are so many arenas that food touches on, that it connects to, that so much of how we socialize, how much we express caring for others. So often food was involved, and I studied marriage and family therapy at one time, and Monica McGoldrick wrote a book that showed different cultural groups and wrote about them. And one of them, we were supposed to choose two or three and write about them, any two or three. So I was reading the one that was about German people, and how when someone came into the house, you were to prepare and offer food and beverage immediately. And I read this to my mother and I said, does this sound like our family? And at that time, we didn't know that the Jaeger, the people that had come from Germany and that area of the world, were definitely our ancestors. But I identified with that story of providing food and beverage to anyone who walked in the house, and if you didn't, I mean, it was wrong. There was something wrong with it, so there's still that aspect now. I do provide beverages that don't have sugar, that don't have sweetener, sometimes even, teas of various sorts, a coffee for those who use coffee. But it's a very different orientation, to offer those things and have it not be all food, food and specifically sugar related. So I appreciate your perspective. Well, how, in terms of getting children off of sugar to the degree that you can, and flour off to the degree that you can, how had you managed that in your own household?
Well, I started to add things, not to take away things at first. And then it was kind of like moderation. But I started with giving them healthy fats and healthy protein. And I was also teaching them about what are certain kind of food doing to your body or your brain, mostly. I was having charts, we get papers and so on with foods, you buy this and buy that and so on. So we took our scissors and we made some charts with, okay, this is good food for the brain, and when you eat this happens in your body and your brain and so on. So I was teaching them about what happens, and then adding good fat, adding good protein, and making sure that they had 3 good meals a day on certain times, and then and sometimes a meal in between if they needed. And then I started to remove kind of or moderate And sometimes I like, because in my in this area in Sweden is very close to Norway, and they eat and they eat a lot of breads, you know. They eat it for breakfast, they eat it for lunch, and they can have it for dinner or whatever, and usually it's with jam on top. So when I was, you know, doing this, I was okay, you can have one sandwich and you can have a lot of butter and you can have a lot of sausage on it, you know, and keeping in mind to not deprive, but keep adding things, you know. And as I was making the changes, I was okay. Of course, I was taking away the amount of candy. They could choose some, but they had to eat it together with the meal and so on. So in this house, we had breakfast, and then they had their Saturday candy, and then it was finished, you know, because then they would have the day to eat more good food and run out and play and doing this kind of stuff. So I was kind of, I was thinking like harm reduction, because I wasn't able to take all the sugars away for my two oldest, because my husband wasn't on that in that place in that area right now. He was together with me, of course, but he wasn't ready to let everything go himself. So I just had to do with what I could do then. But this was the way. And then I was also trying to be very, what is it? Very, what's the word in English? I keep losing it. Present. Thank you. Yeah, I was really working hard to being present with my children, because I hadn't been. So yeah, it was a lot of work in a lot of different areas, but mainly with food, it was adding, and then taking it away, removing it slowly, kind of. Yeah.
I had one friend who her children were older and loved sweets. And so when she started changing to include more vegetables in their food, they were like, oh, I don't like these. And so she added artificial sweetener, which many people see as being negative, but it allowed them the sweet taste while she transitioned them out of the sugar. And so today they like vegetables. They find the sweetness in the natural vegetable, which was a transition from, you know, it was a harm reduction process for her.
Yeah.
So, you know, people find different ways to, you know, do things that add, and I really appreciate your adding things in initially so that there were these delicious things to eat, just somewhat different.
And I think for kids, it's important, or it was for my kids, to have like a buffet or a smorgasbord with good things, you know. You have some salami or a sausage or boiled eggs, fried eggs, or, you know, making all kinds. And then they can pick and choose what, because usually there is something they like. And you don't have to be, you know, the fight about you have to eat this and you have to eat this. If they choose what they want to eat, okay, today it's sausage and cucumber. Great. Eat as much as you like until you get full. That's great. You know.
Fabulous techniques. Well, what steps are beneficial in terms of helping, you know, you've talked about making the additions and then moderating the negatives and then removing the negatives. What other kinds of things besides around the food, what other changes were you making with your family? Were there other activities that you were engaging with them? You said about being present with them rather than somewhere off in your own thoughts, and, you know, and certainly your presence is amazing. I mean, you are very present here and positive, and, you know, that had to have been a shift from, you know, the self involvement that's involved with food addiction and sugar addiction. So what other kinds of things were happening in the family? And did your husband ever change over? I mean, has he altered his eating over the years?
Yeah, he did. He didn't. He's not totally out of sugar or and so on. But we don't have any flour in the house. Well, we do, but that's not for every day. Kind of. It's like if you want to make some. I have a the children has a cousin who's here to play sometimes, and then we make the play do. It's a kind of yeah, and then we
I
have
know.
yeah.
That's a good use for it.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. But that's well, he changed his way of eating, and he kind of, if I'm if I was the driver on the train, he kind of jumped in, and then he climbed up, so to say, in front of. So yeah, he really made some changes. He really did, and I think when I mean the disease, the addiction is very. It's very easy to spread, but so is recovery. If you are in recovery, it kind of spreads and it touches everyone. And I think the main thing that I did beside being present was playing together with my kids. I was building outside, things where to climb and jump and I was doing it together with them, because I knew that was kind of the only way to get them outside and play, because they wanted to stay inside. But I mean, doing things together with them, and also trying to help them to put names on feelings, what they were feeling, and how to handle that. I mean, if they were having tantrums, being angry, screaming and shouting and so on, I was like, okay, I can see that you are angry now, putting a word on the feeling, but you're still not allowed to hit your sister or your brother or whatever, but helping them to feel the feelings and trying to make it okay. Even if I wasn't feeling okay about it all the time, I was trying to make space, make room for feelings, and expressing them and asking them how do they feel. When I'm thinking back, oh my God, all the things that I did with my children, they were my guinea pigs. I was trying everything, doing the massage and trying to help them to meditate, and painting and reading and playing outdoors. And oh my God, they've been through a lot together with me, and I'm happy I tried it. But sometimes yeah, they've been through a lot, really.
And some of it will stick, and some of it will come back to them years later.
Probably.
I had mentioned about my sister and myself skiing together since she was in 5th grade and I was in 9th grade. And now I'm 75 and she's 71, and we're still skiing together. So those things that my parents offered us, lessons, ski lessons. We lived in a place where it rained all the time, and I was very depressed. And they offered that opportunity, I'm sure, to help, get us out of the rain into the snow. So, and it's worked all these years. So you never know what will stick.
No, that's true.
Good thing. Well, what's the most challenging thing in the process of making these changes? What did you find the most challenging, and what worked?
What I find most challenging, I think, is the society, to meet other parents, grandparents, other parents of the children's friends, and so on. And that's why I wanted to make a community where we recovering sugar addicts wanting to make changes with our children. I wanted us to have a place to meet and to have support and so on. But still, when I'm asking this question, asking other parents this question, I think this is the most common answer, that is so difficult to meet the society. Because you can't choose what the kids eat in school. You can't choose what they eat when they are going to friends. And if you are choosing or are telling that this is the way I want them to eat, you get a label in the front of your head, you're crazy woman or something. So I think this is the most challenging. This, and also what we were talking about before, that we so strongly connect food or sweets or so on with love, and we think that we deprive our children of love when we take away sugar or flour or so on. And what was the other part of the question? I forgot.
About that process of making changes and how challenging it is. I mentioned about my grandmother and her making the donuts, but she also taught me to crochet. And I love crocheting. And when I was going to quit smoking, in my 20s, I started crocheting again. And that was such a gift to have that access to something to use my fingers with. When I was quitting another addiction. So there are things that we connect with and add to and may not use right then, but use later. So I appreciate your sharing those. Well, what, in terms of teens and preteens and children and toddlers, what differences are there in beginning the changes? You started when they were fairly young. When you're working with other families and they're older, do these same procedures work, or are there things that need to be different? Just as you mentioned with the pushback that preteens, they get into, if you tell me to do it, I'm doing the opposite.
Exactly. And I think I also think that's when they get older, like when they're 6, 7, 8, up to 10 or something, you can still kind of control what they're doing, even if you can't control what they're eating at their friends' house and so on. But, and especially here in Sweden, when they turn 13 or something, they usually go to, it's not high school, but another level of right. Schooling. And then they go further away from home, and usually in closer to a town or something. Mm-hmm. And that's when most of us kind of lose control, especially over food, because if they have some money, they go buy sweets. That's what they do. And from this age, from 13 up to maybe 18 or something, of course you can do the changes, but you really, really have to have the kid on the train then, or the child, the youth, the young person. And I find it difficult to make changes if the young person or young adult doesn't want to do it themselves. Mm-hmm. Because you can't force someone in recovery. You can teach them, you can talk to them, you can give them knowledge, you can give them opportunities and help them in so many other ways. But I also think it's very difficult because so much, again, in the society, and especially with young people from age 13 or something, is around, hanging around, watching whatever screen, telephone, TV, whatever, and eating snacks of some kind. Mm-hmm. And I see that very, very early. So I think that in that age, it's more of doing a confrontation, telling them that I think that, because usually they come with this problem, they're being depressed, or they're not present in school, or other stuff, and you can kind of tell them, I think that this might depend on what you are eating, and tell them stories or give them knowledge, what happens to your brain and to your body when you eat this, and this might cause a depression or these kind of feelings and so on. But usually I see that this is where the parents need help, really, the support to not fall apart, really, because of hurt sometimes. Because I to be honest with you, and it hurts me, it's difficult to make changes from 13 up to maybe 18. Still teachable, and still if someone's willing to talk and try to do changes, of course, but it's difficult then. It's really difficult.
There are so many things that have to do with like the screens. Robert Pretlow, I interviewed at an earlier time, and I've seen that he has some new research out about apps on smartphones for young people. and to identify the changes that they want to make, their own chosen changes, and then the incremental steps to accomplish those changes. So, he's sort of hooked in, well, you want to make these changes yourself. You have these ideas about what you would like to look like or be like, or physical fitness, or any of those kinds of things. And with the screen has hooked them, so, and that he had success with young people. So they're out there. And with Sweden, I had not heard the thing about Saturday sweets. And I think, the dentists really, really were activists in terms of making changes societally. That's an amazing thing. So I hope you'll share that with Heidi Guyver, because she's involved with working with the Public Health Collaborative in Britain. And she has one group that's involved is the dental group. So that's a very positive incremental change toward, dental caries being eliminated, which, isn't that an amazing thing for dentists who benefit from dental caries in some sense, not themselves, but
I think it's great. I have a dentist here in Sweden who made us have contact, and she's working with children, and she wanted to know if it's like she said, she's having children visiting, and she's saying you have to take care of your teeth and eating less sugar, because otherwise this and this will happen. And then they come back 6 months later or a year later, and nothing happened. And she was like, why is this happening? And that's when she discovered that maybe there might be an addiction. So I think this is another way to go around it, kind of. And also for people to get help, parents to get help. I mean, that someone else is saying it, Right. But I also think, the main changes you can do, if it's not all about food, you can still add things. You can add good fats, good protein, and make sure that, when the children come from school, that you have a good meal prepared, and still, okay, what kind of protein do you like? What kind of fats do you like? You can still do that at home. But also here, it's so much about being present, asking, how do you feel? What's happening in school? What's happening on your phone? I think this is the other addiction that's getting very early onset now, is the phone, the apps, and the screen, and really, really a lot about it. So even if I think food comes first, I think that the second now is the screen.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different aspects. What when you compare the generational changes, like hormone changes, generation changes, aging process, how do you see all of that? As people are becoming adolescents and then going through the hormonal changes of adolescence, and their food consumption may change. Certainly females with PMS and late luteal phase dysphoric disorder, all of those kinds of hormonal issues that food is connected to, or trauma. Bessel van der Kolk's work with trauma and food connections, that people using food to suppress the trauma. Certainly you talking and being present with your children, talking about emotions and feelings and putting names to them, having it be something to talk about and experience with others, really helps. That it's not just pushed down with food. So that I would see as making a difference also, that those are really helpful strategies that you're engaging in. Have you noticed hormonal changes having effects on the children as they're both the males and females?
I couldn't say if it's, but of course it is. I mean, well, you can see the patterns as they grow older, but usually, I mean, if they start gaining weight because of hormonal imbalances and so on, it's in this age when it starts happening. I mean, they're gaining or losing weight depending on what kind of biochemistry they have and so on. So yeah, that's something you can see. And also the mental health also gets an issue in that age, especially, I mean, if we talk about the PMS and so on, for girls, but also for boys. And sometimes I'm thinking that these young people are very, very sensitive, emotionally sensitive. And it's if you are that sensitive, it's difficult to not have a language for what you're feeling and how to express them. Of course it is. But to remember that food always comes first, that I can't make the changes if I don't have the food in place. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can have experienced a trauma or something that I have to express or talk about, but for me, or being an addict, you have to have the food in place first, because otherwise you can't reach the core, kind of, because the food will always come back, so to say, mm-hmm. to cover it or something.
Right. That's one of the things with the research now, that they're saying that the eating disorders, which have traditionally been treated with moderation, that we should be able to eat everything, but in moderation, that the psychological issues are the major piece. And with food addiction, we look at it the opposite direction, as you just said, that we have to deal with the food first, and abstinence from whatever those substances are that are problematic for us. And for some people, they're different. I mean, sugar is certainly major for almost everybody who's a food addict. Flour, for some of us, grains, all grains become an issue, like in the progression of the disease, that what I could eat when I was 20, I can't eat at 70. I would like to, but it doesn't work anymore. So, the progression of the disease as aging occurs, that's one of those things too, for older people as well as younger people. So with all of that, those kinds of changes, are ones that you're talking about, but they continue over time. They're not, they don't just stop along the way. So this idea that moderation is the solution for an eating disorder, and yet that person may have a food addiction that either underlies or is the significant. How do you encourage people, deal with the food first, and then with all of these emotions and psychological issues, and then moderation of the things that you can eat, but first abstain from, the glaring ones?
Yeah.
Is that making sense to you as well?
Yeah, it does. But this is when I worked with, I don't do clients. I don't work with clients anymore. But when I did, that was adult persons, when I always had, okay, you have to be abstinent or get the food sorted before you dive into doing any kind of research or trauma work or so on. And I've been very clear with that, and I know that not all persons are doing it like this, and but this is the way that I'm doing it, because and that's my own experience. So that's where I come from. I had depressions, and I had things that I had to talk about, but I wasn't reaching the core until the food was in order, so to say. And for me, that took several years, not to get the food in order, but before I was ready to do the trauma work, kind of. Mm-hmm. So, but that's my personal experience, and that's how I do, or how I did more
Yeah.
clients.
That was my experience too. Very, very similar. Well, another one of the things that comes up, and we've talked about it a bit in terms of grandparents, um, the codependency, the wanting, and this isn't just about grandparents, but the wanting to give so generously to young people and, the people we love. And that codependency of wanting to give them what we didn't have, whatever that was. And how can we help parents and families to offer healthy alternatives, like the ones that you shared about going outside and doing activities that were physical outside, so that the kids were with you and enjoying themselves. And I think about some of the times that we've used with young people, the things, they're circles that you can make bubbles with, and then do the bubbles, and it has to be outside because it's soapy water. So you don't want it in the house. But how fun it is to do things like that with adults, and that they're having fun and we're having fun, and older people, younger people, all the intergenerational things. So how do you encourage that? How do you get people to participate?
Well, I've been thinking about, it entered my mind now that when when one of my children were born, we were, in his class, there were 4 other children born in the same week, and we kind of met when we delivered, kind of, and we still keep in contact, and we were, some parents or mothers, mainly only, who got together, and at first it was all about eating cookies and chatting and so on. But then as I entered recovery and I changed the way my children was eating, and I wasn't allowing them to eat all these kinds of stuff. And then at one point when we had a meeting, it was in the winter, and my husband he took the tractor and made a kind of path in the snow out here, and I was putting out small, not candles but lanterns or something, burning live fire, so to say. And at every point I was putting them out with different distances, and I was writing something like, "You are beautiful, what's your favorite color," all this, and doing this emotional experience instead of just staying inside and eating a lot of stuff. So and I think they appreciated it. And also I made them write a letter. I was saying, okay, think of where you want to be in 6 months, and you write a letter for yourself, and I'll keep it here and I'll mail it to you. I won't read it, and so that's also one thing that I did. So I tried to kind of be an example of how to stay together without eating all the time. And now when we get together, it's not so much about that. We talk a lot, and we talk about feelings and what happens in ours and our children's lives. But I can also see that I don't ever have to bring things for me to eat, because everyone knows what I eat and what I need to feel good. And that's a blessing. I mean, I'm really grateful of that, and happy that they do this for me. So I think I kind of dropped some water in the ocean, so to say.
Certainly. And it's rippling out. I remember an experience when I was having a birthday party, and I got to invite a neighbor to come and have dinner with our family, and it was my birthday. And in my childhood, the things we got to choose on our birthday what we wanted for the meal. And I always wanted to have cake, a particular kind. And another dish that is my Welsh and German heritage, that was potatoes, mashed potatoes with egg noodles on top of it and beef and gravy. Now, my mother wisely said to me, you know, the neighbor child may not like this. Carbs on top of carbs on top of carbs with a little bit of meat added.
Yeah.
You know, this probably worked for people who were working in the fields. I mean, even my grandparents, I mean, as much as they worked outdoors and with animals and physical labor, maybe it would work for them, but I didn't live that kind of life, and neither did my mom and dad. So, but it was something that was familiar. It was something that was special. It was like the jars of chocolate that you mentioned with your grandfather, you know.
Yeah.
So, but my mother said, you know, the neighbor may not like this. And I thought, how could she not love it?
How could he not love it? Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes it's that traditional dishes and you know, the heritage, the cultural heritage. As we've looked at the Yale food addiction scales being validated in different places in the world, there are some places where the number percentage of food addicts is higher, and some of my heritage locations are those. So it's not surprising. So, you know, there are places that have healthier foods available. And that's one of the things in the United States. We've talked about food deserts, where communities of people have only a mom and pop store that's in the neighborhood. And the only things that they have there are sugar sweetened beverages, sugar treats, just flour and sugar and nothing else. I mean, there are no vegetables, there are no fruits, there are no proteins, no healthy oils. I mean, and people really have to go out of their neighborhood to find healthier alternatives. So I mean, living on a dairy farm, what has been your experience? Can you really make a difference in your community?
Wow. Well, to I my first the first thing that I'm thinking is no, I can't. But but I think it's only because you don't preach to the closest one, if you understand what I mean. I think someone else could come here and tell my neighbors what to do and what not to do, but not me. But anyway, I think that the word kind of is spreading, and it's like I said, it's like being an example, living an example. But I'm also thinking about I don't know if it's the same or if you have seen it in research, but it seems like here in Sweden anyway, that research shows that the more educated you are, the more knowledge you have about what food does to your brain and your body, and it's more likely that you kind of cut down on sugar or white flour and so on. And I know, especially in this area where I live, it has changed during the past years. But when we moved here, you couldn't almost open the door, and everybody was like, "Oh, coffee and a bun." I mean, something sweet together with it. But now it's fine to just have a cup of coffee, like you said before, or a cup of tea, and you don't have to offer something beside it. It's not like you are a UFO if you don't do it, which it felt like to start with when I did that, you know. So I don't think that I made the change, but it feels like the society in large has become more aware of what sugar and flour does to you, and it's not that uncommon anymore. And that's when I the other day, my oldest daughter, she's going to a school where they learn to, it's like a free life school, and they're learning to guide other people around and going outdoors on trekking and so on. And they wanted to make a trekking for us parents in this month coming. And I was, you know, fooling around because everyone who's coming to this guide was supposed to email my daughter and she was collecting all the names and arrangements and so on. And I was fooling around, mailing her and saying, well, when we are going to eat, your father, he wants a double portion, and me, I want a sugar, sweetener, flour-free, blah blah blah, the way that I eat. And I was joking around, surely she was the only one who was going to read it. And then the next day she was having a phone call. Mom, what do you eat? And it turned out that some of her friends and one of the teacher had read the mail when I was very specific about what I was having, and the teacher said, well, this is something you are all going to meet, people who eat like this, so let's make her what she wants. So I'm to be honest, a little, I'm bringing my own food, just to be
just
safe.
In case, right?
Yeah. But they were like, okay, but how can we do it? Okay, so if you're having a burger, can you have a salad instead of the bread? They were popping up with new ideas, and I was like, wow, this is great. Because usually I meet like the question my daughter was, what do you eat? It's not like, well, you have a lot of food that you can eat.
Right.
And so that was great. So I think that the society in large is getting more conscious about how the food can affect you in all kinds of ways. And I don't think that was the answer of your question. I'm sorry.
No, I think it is. It's a wonderful answer. Wonderful. No, that those kinds of little incremental changes where we open doors and open possibilities for people to think about food and what we're putting into our bodies and what happens as a result is really remarkable. I didn't know, we don't know what we don't know. And I didn't know that when I would get tired or hungry 2 hours after I ate something, that it was an indicator that that wasn't something I should be eating, independent of, whether somebody else in my family could eat it. My mother can eat very differently than I can, very differently. I mean, I just am in awe of what she can eat without relative effect. I mean, if she gains a couple of pounds over a 2-week period of doing genealogy together, we're both, in restaurants for 2 weeks, she may gain a couple of pounds. And then she says, oh, well, I'm just going to be a little more careful at home for a little while. And she loses the 2 pounds.
Yeah.
That was not my life experience. That was not me. First of all, I would gain 10 pounds over that 2 weeks. I mean, it wouldn't be 2. It would be, a large amount if I were just eating the way I used to eat. So, and the thing about, that for a while, not eating white flour was sufficient. That not eating sugar and white flour was sufficient. It made a huge difference for me. But then brown flour and rice and grains and, brown sugar, all of those kinds of things started to bother me in ways that I could no longer tolerate. So I attribute that. I heard Father Martin do a thing called Chalk Talk, which is still out, on the internet. And he talked about the progressive and fatal nature of the disease of alcoholism. And I see, and I think Bitten would say that our sugar addiction is a primary addiction. It comes even before alcohol, that sugar primes the pump for alcohol and other drugs and behaviors. So what I could do at one point, later I couldn't, but that idea that if I wanted something 2 hours later, maybe I had put into my body something that I shouldn't have put into my body, which was news to me. What? I wish I had known you. earlier.
But it's like you said, we don't know what we don't know. And for me, I was also, I mean, I know the food came first, but for me, I also have a volume addiction, which makes it really, together with what you just said, you know, for me, I really need to eat a meal that makes me feel satisfied, which is
Yes.
very difficult when you have a volume addiction. Because for me, I know my mother-in-law, she asked me once, but what do you eat when you talk about sugar addiction and you're not feeling well? So what is it that you are doing and what do you eat? And I was like, okay, I eat this and this and this and this and this. And she was like, how do you get that into your little body? You know, how can you fit it into your stomach? And I was like, no problem, you know. And uh, I mean, it's like explaining color to someone who's colorblind or something. But it's so, I think it's so crucial to learn these things, to get knowledge about how your addiction works. Because if I'm a sugar addict, I'm working in this way. I'm doing these things. I overeat or I undereat, and then I meet another person who also says that I'm a sugar addict and does other things like exercising or not exercising or eating little or whatever. It's such a broad spectrum of things that you do or don't do. So I think the knowledge is so important when you recover and to get to know your own addiction. How do I react? Like you said, if I'm hungry or not feeling satisfied, it might be that I've eaten something that I really shouldn't have on my food plan.
Right.
I did the same journey, starting out with cutting out white flour and white sugar, or all sugar and sweeteners, but still keeping some of the brown, so to say. But I quickly learned that I couldn't do that either. So yeah, but it's like you said, okay, some things that really worked out fine to start with, I can't do that today because my disease is much stronger, much worse. So the recovery is a journey. It truly is a journey in all areas.
Well, I love your mentioning the volume addiction because that is true for me also. And when I heard Bitten Johnson talk about oxytocin and that the part that is our gut inside of us, you know, moving from mouth to anus, is the same as the skin on the outside, that it's just involuted during the formation of our entity here. I thought, I'm giving myself a hug on the inside.
Yes.
That's what that is with the quantity. I'm putting pressure on my insides with quantity. So then I had to find quantity, right? Right. I had to find quantity that didn't that would fill me up, but and satisfy me, but in ways that were not so massively caloric that I was getting larger, which was what I had done when I was in the food. So that idea is so useful and helpful. Like, I need more hugs. I mean, sometimes it is literally that, the expression of time and energy and giving a hug. And during COVID, it's been so
but you
sad.
know what, when you mentioned this, I realized that one of the things that I really love doing is like I like to drink a hot cup of tea, and I lay down on the couch and I put my dog in front of my stomach close to me, and he cuddles, close to me. And then the other dogs come and lay on top of me like this. That's a hug, a warm inside and then a hug from the outside. And that's oxytocin, a big amount.
Big amount. And it didn't require food. It was all touch and sensate. What a lovely image of you with the dogs. Lovely. Well, I'm so grateful to you for this time and for your sharing and for the wealth of information that you've shared. It's just such a gift. And I hope lots and lots of parents and family members get to hear this and see it and try out some of the many specific ideas that you've shared. So, and those dogs gathering around, what a gift. What kinds of dogs are they?
They're dachshunds, small
Oh,
dachshunds. Yeah.
oh. And very warm and cuddly. Very
Yes,
warm.
they are. They are.
My sister has Chiweenie, which is part dachshund and part Chihuahua. He is
Oh,
so warm and cuddly. Oh my gosh. So
oh, I haven't heard that before, but that
yes,
sounds like a terrific mix, you know?
he's so cute. He's so
Yeah.
cute. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you, thank you, thank you, Annica. And when your book is available in English, now it can be on the Food Addiction Institute site in Swedish. And when it's available in English, please let us know so that we can announce it and share it with the world.
Oh,
So,
well, thank you. I'd love to. And thank you so much for having me. And I hope that I can give some hope and knowledge to anyone who needs it. Thank you.
well, Annica, thank you very much. And will you send me your information so how people can reach you, so we can attach that to the YouTube. So thank
I
you
will.
so much. I'm just thrilled to have been with you, and it's been just lovely. I could go on being with you for days now.
Yeah.
So
Well, Sam, I
thank
really enjoyed it. Yeah. Thank you.
thank you. Again, I want to thank Annica Strandberg-Schmidt for being with us today and sharing with us her own story and that of the many things that she's done to support her children and her community with regard to sugar addiction and freedom from it. How to make healthy food changes with your children. And she certainly has shared many examples of that. So thank you. Thank you for being with us today. And please, if you are able to do so, please donate to foodaddictioninstitute.org. If you go to our website, foodaddictioninstitute.org, you can find the donation location. And we appreciate all donations, large and small. So thank you very much, and wishing you a day filled with opportunities to grow and change with regard to sugar addiction and food addiction. Thank you.